We're going to talk inflation. We're going to talk economy. We're going to talk about the January 6th committee today. That's right. On this Friday edition of Down the Road, we've got a lot of heavy. We've got a lot of heavy for you, not the least of which is that January 6th committee. We're going to be talking about what he sees happening as a journalist, as a reporter. Suresh Date is our guest. He is a correspondent with the Huffington Post. Sir, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Hey, thanks for having me aboard.
20 million people last Thursday watched. I was one of the 20 million. I don't know if I was counted amongst them, but I will tell you this. People are paying attention to this January 6th committee.
Yeah, there are. They are getting some impressive viewership numbers. Even the next one, which was, I believe, it was in the morning hours, got a pretty sizable viewership. I think like 11 million or something like that. But beyond that, I think it's entering the public discussion, the public zeitgeist, if you will. You know, just the consciousness of, hey, you know, this is going on, and maybe January 6th was more serious than we've been allowing for this past year, because it has really fallen off the radar screen of a lot of people, as you can see from polling. So this is going to get people more into the idea that something really bad almost happened on January 6th.
Well, folks, it isn't like he doesn't do his homework. 5 novels, previous 2 political biographies, including one of former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, 3 years in this business, or 3 decades, I should say, in this business. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, have you seen anything? This is a foolish question, but have you seen anything like this before? It's the 50th anniversary of Watergate. I mean, what have you seen before? How does this compare?
This is like nothing I've seen before. And I've talked to former prosecutors about the idea of there's a grand jury in Georgia right now looking at what he did to try to get the election to swing his way down there. There is, of course, a federal grand jury in D.C. looking at what he did to basically steal the election results because they didn't go his way nationally. No, absolutely. In 232 years of elections, Donald Trump is the first one to basically threaten the end of democracy in order to stay in power. That's unheard of, right? And I think people haven't really quite gotten their arms around that, because it's hard. I mean, we saw the people rioting, we saw the people, coming through the doors, but the connection between what Trump did personally and what his White House did to help him and what ended up happening at the Capitol is still, I think, a little tenuous in some people's minds. And I think these hearings will help make that stronger connection.
It isn't real to me. It's like it was all in. I play poker, but I play poker with my friends, not this Texas Hold'em type poker. I'm the kind of guy who says, you call the game kind of a poker, but you put yourself at risk. I mean, you know about this. You're a blue water sailor. You in a 40-some foot cutter, you've traveled all over with your 2 sons. I mean, this was a risk that they put at where it's like they exhausted every opportunity they had through the courts, through the local governments, through the state. And then this was it. This was the last chance they had, but it seems as though they never took a look at what this could do to them from a history standpoint.
Right. No, well, Donald Trump personally is not very interested in history. He doesn't care about legacy. Most presidents by now would have been into the planning stages or beyond for their presidential libraries. And, we've seen not one word of that from the 45th president. So he doesn't care about legacy. He doesn't care about history. He cares about right now. What's going to happen to me now, tomorrow morning, maybe next week at the outside. And interestingly, though, some of the people in that White House did care about that. We saw testimony yesterday from the general counsel to the vice president, who, this is not a liberal. This is not a guy who, takes, the stuff in the Constitution with, things change over time. We ought to be interpreting differently. No, this is a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. He got up there and said what they were talking about was just beyond the pale. You had a federal judge who was almost appointed to the Supreme Court by George W. Bush, right? J. Michael Ludwig, for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. He got up there and said that Donald Trump and his supporters are a clear and present danger to democracy in America right now. Right now, not what they did, but today, right now, what they're planning to do in 2024. This is a real threat. Again, this is not some flaming liberal from California. This is Michael Ludwig, right? He might have been a justice on the Supreme Court. So people need to pay more attention to what these folks are saying. Take it seriously. This isn't a game. This isn't, and this should transcend politics. Honestly, it really should. This is not about marginal tax rates or what the Medicaid benefit ought to be. It's about democracy. This is the core. This is the fundamental thing what this country is about.
Some of those signs you talked about in 2024 are already out there in the 2022 election. You're looking at some county commissioners not certifying elections, not liking what the results of those elections are. When you say this democracy's in danger, in peril in 2024, as the judge said, it's true. I mean, it is really true. Fair elections where the majority of people vote one way could lose elections after this.
Right. I mean, and the stuff we're seeing with some of these Secretary of State candidates running around the country is just frightening. I mean, basically, they're saying that the elections are, they're a suggestion, and in the end, we should win. And that's the rule. That's not democracy. What Donald Trump wanted to remain in office after losing the election, what would we have called him? He wouldn't be president, because that's not what happens. If you lose an election, you don't get that title, right? So we came close to having, I don't know if we actually would have ended up with an autocracy, because I think we have such a big bureaucracy, but it would have been a bloody, on the streets type civil war. That's how ugly it would have gotten had someone like Mark Meadows, for example, been vice president instead of Mike Pence.
So on my radio talk show, people throw things at me. Let's play a little game of you countering them rather than me in this particular case. One of the individuals that called in just recently said Nancy Pelosi had the opportunity because Donald Trump gave her permission to call out the National Guard. True or false?
That's false. Nancy Pelosi does not control the National Guard. That's ridiculous. The president has that authority, only the president. I will tell you this. I have spoken to folks in the United States military who confirmed to me that the reason they didn't want to have 10,000 troops beforehand, just in case, was they were worried that Donald Trump would attempt a coup. And they did not want to have their troops have divided loyalties between what their commanding officer was saying to them regarding the Capitol and what the commander-in-chief was telling them via Twitter and potentially via broadcast. They didn't want him using those troops to do what he wanted to do, which is to remain in office. That's why they weren't there.
True or false? I had Congressman Armstrong on recently, and he said to me, this is not in any way, shape, or form a bipartisan committee. And the reason it isn't is because leadership of the Republican House didn't get a chance to pick the members on this committee. Is this committee, the January 6th committee, bipartisan or not?
It's absolutely bipartisan. The two of the members are Republicans, have been Republicans for a whole lot longer than Donald Trump has been a Republican, for example. Now, Kevin McCarthy made a choice. He decided that when Nancy Pelosi basically said people who were actively engaging in spreading the election lies and who could be witnesses in this investigation, for example, Jim Jordan, cannot be on the committee, McCarthy said, forget it then, I'll just take my marbles and leave. And he did. That was a choice. But to say that it's not partisan when Liz Cheney, who has one of the most conservative voting records in the entire Congress, is on that committee, not only on the committee, she's vice chair. How can you say it's not bipartisan unless you're redefining conservatism as pure loyalty to Donald Trump as supreme leader? Then I guess it's not bipartisan.
True or false? Donald Trump never did anything where he told people to go to the Capitol in any way, shape, or form, be violent.
He did say in his prepared remarks that people should go peacefully. That is true. However, he also said that you don't get anything unless you're prepared to fight. He said that repeatedly. He personally, he put his personal imprimatur on the idea that Mike Pence had it in his power to do this, and if Mike Pence didn't do this, then he was a traitor. That was, he didn't use that word, but that's essentially what he said. That's the message he gave. So that is correct. He did tell them to march over to the Capitol peacefully. Of course, that was an illegal march. There was no permit for it. Let's remember that. And certainly once they got there and started going through police lines, that's a crime. And then after this thing was happening, after people had broken into the Capitol, Donald Trump put out a tweet saying that Mike Pence failed to have the courage, or I forget the exact language, but didn't have the courage to do what it was necessary. Come on. I mean, as one of his own aides testified, it was pouring gasoline on the fire at that point.
What do you think would have happened if, they were feet away from Mike Pence? What do you think would have happened if they would have caught him, if they would have been anywhere close to him?
I can't even imagine how ugly that would have gotten, because we know for a fact that many of the people who entered the building were armed. We know this. There is testimony, there are affidavits, court documents showing this. The Secret Service at that point would have drawn their weapons and done what? How many people would they have, shot? They would have been outnumbered. I mean, can you imagine what a nightmare that would have been? And it was because of one person's fault, all of this. And that was the former president of the United States.
One last question, I promise. I know you probably got 5 more books to write and half the world to sail around. A man like you just is amazing to me. But where does this go? Do you think Merrick Garland has the courage to indict some of these individuals and bring them into a court of law?
Well, this is the funny thing. I mean, Merrick Garland has been doing a lot. He just hasn't been holding press conferences about everything that he's been doing. But look very carefully at the charges that the prosecutors are forcing those who are accepting pleas to take. They're making them plead to illegally obstructing an official proceeding, right? What does that mean? What is the official proceeding that they're obstructing? It was a certification vote. So if you're making these yutzes who are breaking into the Capitol plead to that, guess what? You're taking the obstruction of official proceeding seriously. Well, you can prove pretty easily that Donald J. Trump tried to obstruct an official proceeding by everything he did between November 3rd and January 6th. So, yeah, I'm not in that camp that Merrick Garland is doing nothing. He's doing a lot. And I guess, it's not his job to let us know every step of the way what he's doing. But I think we'll find out.
The only thing you surprised me with out of all of that was the last. And I have to tell you, it sounds like yours was based on fact. Mine was based on speculation. I can only hope you're right. And something in my gut tells me you might be. Thank you for coming on, sir. I appreciate it.